Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from Red State dated April 17th, and it says, New! DNI Gabbard declassifies the details of Team Biden's roadmap for left-wing ideological warfare. This is kind of a longer one, so just strap in, but I saw this the other day. I'm not sure how many other people saw it. I really haven't seen much of it reported on, but this is kind of terrifying that this is what your government was about to do to you. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I would just assume, actually, before we get into it, that if Kamala had won, this would actually be happening now. So now we'll get into it. It says, Director of National Intelligence, or DNI, Tulsi Gabbard has now released the declassified part of the Biden administration's game plan that sought to censor about half of the American people over the past 4 years and ahead of the November 2024 election. The strategy was known as the Strategic Implementation Plan for Countering Domestic Terrorism, and that's her embedded tweet. We're going to skip down. So she writes, as promised, I have declassified the Biden administration's Strategic Implementation Plan for Countering Domestic Terrorism. Former Missouri State Attorney General and now Senator Eric Schmitt, Republican of Missouri, has shared a helpful breakdown of the scheme on his X account. He begins by describing it as a roadmap for left-wing ideological warfare. And there's his embedded tweets. Let me just see if it goes to summarize it down here. It does. Okay. It says, this was written in the early months of the Biden presidency, he writes, but it lays out in detail exactly what they would go on to do and how they justified it. Senator Schmitt continues, says, by adopting the framework of domestic terrorism, or DT, they could effectively treat their critics as enemies of the state. And it says, it was so troubling that even the liberals at the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, called it out, which is kind of funny because just, you know how far left they are at the ACLU, and even they were like, yeah, this is a bit much, guys. And so if you're wondering why there were, churches were being surveilled by the FBI, and parents at conferences at school or school board meetings were being arrested, well, here's the roadmap. So go on here. I'm going to skip past Eric Schmitt's tweets because it'll probably sum it up. It says, but it was even worse than anyone imagined, as the now declassified parts of it reveal. The plan lays out a 4-pillar strategy. 1, understand and share domestic terrorism-related information. 2, prevent domestic terrorist recruitment and mobilization to violence. 3, disrupt and deter domestic terrorism activity. And 4, confront long-term contributors to domestic terrorism. And I apologize for every time I get to the DT abbreviation where I kind of stop, because DT to me means my favorite band, Dream Theater. So I kept wanting to say that, so I apologize. Anyway, back to the article. So Schmitt explains that the first pillar focused on information sharing with every arm of the government, acting like the tentacles of an octopus and reaching into every aspect of Americans' lives. We saw clear signs of this with the major pushback parents across the country got from, here we go, school boards and their children's schools. Says the second pillar was put into place to disrupt conservatives from fighting back against the Biden administration's censorship. And yes, as the Washington Times says, Biden administration may be reviving effort to label conservative parents as domestic terrorists. Yes, because those two things are obviously the same. So it says, as Schmitt explained further in a thread linked here, and I encourage you to go read that. So I did read part of it before. Actually, it was a couple days ago from when I'm recording this. Says this was the part that many readers are all too familiar with, where the Biden administration would partner with powerful third-party actors, big tech, left-wing NGOs, anti-hate groups, etc., to implement the censorship regime. For those of you out there that there's a particular word on the left that you are fond of using, starts with an F and ends with ashism, I would urge you at this point to go look up what the definition of fascism actually is, because you will find out that this is basically it right here. Okay? So, for all you saying out there that you're against fascism, if you supported this, well, hate to break something to you, but you may need to think long and hard about your life choices. As in 2021, as my colleague Brandon Morse wrote, one of those groups, the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, tried to get advertisers to pull their support from Tucker Carlson's then Fox News show. Of course, we would be here all day if I listed all the instances where Team Biden worked hand-in-hand with big tech to silence our side. Once again, I urge you to look up the definition of that particular word. And even though I am Jewish, I am no fan of the ADL, and I think what they were doing was bad. So the third pillar pushed up the priority level of domestic terrorism in the Biden administration while unleashing the FBI to hunt it down. And let's skip down. says readers will likely remember stories in these pages on the FBI making unannounced raids on the homes of innocent pro-life supporters. Yeah, I remember that too. That was an example I didn't bring up before, but I was thinking about, just kind of forgot my words. It says finally, the fourth pillar sought to make our government a vehicle for leftism, as Senator Schmidt writes. And that's not ever going to be a good thing. It says it calls for funding civics education to teach action civics, read left-wing activism, otherwise known as indoctrination, and wielding law enforcement to mitigate xenophobia and bias in COVID policy. It says, as he concludes, we can never again allow our federal government to enact this level of tyranny against the people. That is correct. And that's why I am all in favor of what Donald Trump is doing right now and getting rid of things. And I thought this was going to be longer, mainly because I think when I originally read this article, and I did read it beforehand, I was going through all the tweets as well. That's why I thought it was long. So I think we've only probably like maybe 5 or 6 minutes of recording this at this point. So I apologize about that. But if you go through the whole thing and read all the embedded tweets from Eric Schmidt, which I do recommend, and go through his tweet thread, then yeah, you're going to see that it's a bit of a problem. And like I said, what the Biden government was doing during COVID with this stuff is the actual definition of fascism. So congratulations, people who supported this. You're the exact thing you claim to hate, and that's not a surprise because, well, that's kind of how you guys work. Anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.